All right, so welcome to videos, the first video in a video series where we are going to build out a Sinatra application, and we're going to stick for this application. We're going to stick to the requirements that are listed in the Sinatra portfolio project page. Okay. For this series and in each video, anyone who's here, please, I encourage you to ask questions. If you have a question, I promise you someone else has the exact same question and it's just withholding it. Please don't withhold questions. Let me know if you have questions. You can ask verbally, you can ask in the Zoom chat, and I'll do my best to monitor that. So please ask questions as we go. We're going to start this from scratch. So I don't have any code written. I haven't even picked a domain yet, and I'm going to ask for your help with that. I do have a couple of things prepared, which I'll show you. So what I do have, I have my GitHub open right now. I've got Corneal open, Corneal is a gem we're going to use to get started here in a little bit. I also have the LearnCo Sinatra project page. Well, I'm going to grab it, I should say. There it is, Sinatra portfolio project. And I have the GitHub for that project page. So if I go look, just taking a moment to load here. I have the project page. I've gotten here. I've gotten all the way up to my Sinatra project. This page has all the information I need in terms of what we need to build. We're building a CRUD MVC app using Sinatra. Essentially a simple content management system. And I've got my list of what to expect and my project requirements. And this is what I really need to pay attention to as I go. And as it mentions in this README and in most of the project READMEs, if I go to the GitHub page where this project came from, there's a spec.md file. And let's just grab that quick. And if I click on it, I can see the list of requirements for this project. And this is going to be my guide as we go. This list of requirements will comprise my minimum viable product, the smallest project that I can build that will meet the project requirements. Okay, I've actually already grabbed that and I have it written here. I'll split it off to the right here in my editor, and I can see this list of requirements. Notice that they're the little square brackets if I use the markdown code from GitHub, and I can just put a little X there each time I have it done, and I should write a little explanation like right here. I am using Sinatra to build my app, right? Okay, a little explanation about where I'm meeting each of these requirements as I go. Okay, I have a little guide that I've written about getting started. Does anybody have any general questions before we start thinking about what we want to build today regarding the Sinatra project or any Sinatra project? Everybody feeling okay?
I have a question.
Sure.
This is Alwina speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have to, we definitely have to do like a user authentication, right? Does the user like have to only edit anything that they enter in the CMS?
Yep.
Or can it be any user can edit whatever the content is in the CMS?
So if I look at the spec.md, the spec.md file, which effectively mirrors, by the way, the list of requirements on the LearnCo page. So notice that there are 10 project requirements listed here, well, really 9 plus a bonus. And if I look at my spec.md, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus a bonus. Also, they mentioned the README here where it's not mentioned on the page. But besides that, it's a one-to-one relationship. So I could look at either one of these and see these are my requirements. And to answer your question specifically, I have a requirement that says include user accounts with unique login attributes. Ensure that the belongs to resource has routes for CRUD and that users can't modify content created by other users. So that's the answer to your question. I do need to have user ability to log in and out. And as a user, I should only be able to edit or delete content that I've created, not that other people have created. Does that answer your question, Alwina?
Yeah, yes, it does. Thank
you.
Cool.
So I've got a little guide here, and I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I can share it with you if you'd like to see it. But basically, when I'm picking a domain, I should pick something I'm familiar with, maybe something I can use in real life, something I could use for my job or for something I care about, a domain that I'm familiar with. So does anyone have any ideas, anything you'd like to build today? I do have sort of a backup idea if nobody has anything that we'd like to use. Any thoughts? All right, so what I was going to go with today would be a journaling app, and the reason I would pick, one of the reasons I would pick that is we all know what it's like to write a journal, and it's also very similar to the blog domain, and the blog domain is one of the restricted domains because we've seen a lot of examples of blogging apps throughout these lessons and labs, and so if I build a journal app, then I'm not really limiting what students should be building, if that makes sense. So is everybody okay with that? A journaling app? Okay. I guess any objections?
No, it's good. It's good. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So I have a list here of how to get started with my Sinatra app. And notice that I have a list of pre-coding work. In other words, I'm not writing any code yet. I need to think about what I want to build. I'm going to choose something I care about, something I'm familiar with. Well, I like writing journal entries. Okay, it helps me keep track of my thoughts. So I am familiar with that, and it's something I could use. My wireframing and user stories, I want to be able to answer basically finish the following sentence. As a user, I can, and then finish that sentence. As a user should be able to, and finish that sentence. And so I've actually got a file here where I'm going to start writing that out. So my app overview is going to be, I am going to build a journaling app. Does journaling have two L's? A journal, how about just a journal app? Where a user can create journal entries. Okay. User stories, I have them started here. As a user will be able to, first of all, log in and out. I should say log in, sign up, and log out. As a user, I can create a journal entry. See all my journal entries. Edit my journal entries that I own, so my journal entries, and delete my journal entries. Okay, does this make sense so far to everyone? And my user stories right now are the bare basics. If I look over here at my specifications, I need to have a has many belongs to relationship. I need to have more than one model. This should all be fine. I'm going to use Active Record and Sinatra. I'm going to build user login and out. And I just said that I'm going to make sure that only I can edit, as a user, I can only edit or delete journal entries that I own. So does everybody feel comfortable with the idea where we are so far and what's guiding us? Any questions? Okay. So now I'm going to get into wireframing. And wireframing is the idea of listing my models and listing the associations and attributes of those models. So models will be, in this case, I'm going to say user and entry. All right, is everybody okay with that? We're starting off very simple, just two models, user and entry. I could call this journal entry, I guess. Journal, just to be verbose. Okay. So this is a little starter here for my user model. What are some attributes that I need for user model? What do we want? Any thoughts? Remember that I'm going to keep things simple to start with. A name, okay. What else?
If they have to log in, then they should have a login and a password.
Exactly. Okay, so password, and if I use decrypt, which I'm going to, this will be password digest in the database. Okay. And as far as name goes, and you mentioned they need a login. And so let's decide now, what do we want to use to log a user in? It needs to be a unique attribute. The majority of the time, we're either going to choose a username attribute or an email. Either of those can be unique, and and therefore they make good logins. So what do you guys think? Email or username? We can be democratic here. Any thoughts? Email it is. So name, email, password, and I can add more attributes in the future if I want. So we could think of stretch goals. In other words, goals, things that I would want to add to my project once I have the bare bones up and running. Okay. So for now, this feels fine to me. A user has a name, an email, and a password. How about association? Actually, let's build the attributes of the journal entry first. Okay, so I have a journal entry model. What are the attributes in a journal entry model? What do we think?
You need the content
Perfect.
of it, also the user ID that it belongs to.
Yes, and why do we need the user ID?
So that way we know that it's only that user that can edit that journal entry.
Right, and you've taken a step ahead here by saying we need the user ID, because now we're talking about associations. Okay, so what's my association between a user and a journal entry?
The user has many journal entries, and the journal entry belongs to a user.
Exactly, that's exactly right, and I think that's pretty much all we need to get started. So if we look at the associations, a journal entry belongs to a user. So I know this is kind of a little hard to read in the format that I have. I'm going to, let's see if I can Markdown preview. I'm writing this in Markdown format if you're wondering why, and it shows up on the right side of the screen here. This is what it looks like. It's not really the best, actually, is it? So I could make this look a little better, but you get the idea, I think. The user has a name, email, and password, and has many journal entries. A journal entry has content and user ID. I think a journal entry also should have a date, but this could be that could actually be a stretch goal to make that appear really nicely. I'm going to include it though, because I think dates on journal entries make sense. And we'll talk about how we actually can get some automated dates built right into our models. Okay. So, oops, let's get rid of that. I guess this is really the same thing, so I'm going to simplify that. Users will be able to log in, sign up, log out, create journal entry, see all journal entries. I'll say as a user. There we go. Okay, any questions about anything we've done so far? So I'm going to think about my minimum viable product. Minimum viable product will be users can sign up, log in, log out, create journal entries, edit their own entries, and that's it, I think. Oh yeah, and see their own, and view their entries. Okay, how about some stretch goals? What do we think for stretch goals? A stretch goal, by the way, is something I could add to my application to make it better, but that I don't need to complete in order to satisfy the project requirements. And by the way, this right now we're in the context of building an application for a curriculum. This is a project that you need to pass the curriculum, but this type of layout applies beyond that. If you're building a project and you have a project manager and you get a list of specs, your MVP is going to be satisfy those specs. Along the way, you might think of features that would really enhance the user experience or the functionality, and it's up to you to determine, what your setting is. Should you just go ahead and build them? Should you ask your project manager about those? But either way, we have this idea of a minimum viable product, and then stretch goals will carry on beyond just the classroom, if that makes sense. Okay. Any questions so far? Is everybody feeling all right? No questions? For stretch goals, I would think it might be cool to do something like include a journal model where users can actually have different journals. Users have different journals, and a journal then has many. Okay. We could also do something where users can choose to make their entries public or private. Public or private. I kind of like that one. I think that one might be one of the first stretch goals we go for. If you can choose to make your entry public or private, then other users can see your entries, and maybe you have an uplifting entry or an insightful entry or a funny entry that you'd like to share. Something. So it's like this could be sort of a journal or a blog, that kind of thing, depending on what you want to do. So I like this stretch goal. Any other stretch goals? Anything from the audience that you can think of that would make this that would be cool?
Save a draft.
Pardon?
Save a draft.
Oh, save draft. Okay. Have drafts. Save drafts to edit later. So the idea, I mean, we're sort of going to already have this functionality, right? If I have the ability to edit my own entries, then the first time I fill it out, if I click submit, I could go back and edit it, and therefore that first one would feel like a draft. So maybe it makes sense though to have it marked as a draft and then marked as a final. Is that what you mean too? Like that could be something.
Yeah, especially if we're going to have the private or public functionality. I guess the draft would be private. We're going to private and be marked as draft.
Okay. Final version. Okay, something like that could work, and this could be cool. We definitely have the ability to do all this within our with what we've learned in Sinatra so far. Okay. All right. So at this point in time, I'm going to go back and check my guide. And actually, I should have opened this in Markdown Preview. This is in Student FAQs. There we go. Much easier to read this way. Okay, so if I go back and I check my guide, I've ideated, I know what I want to build, I've chosen my domain, I've built down some wireframing and some user stories. What does the app do? I've built this out, I have my MVP, I've built some stretch goals. Now we can start to code. And now we can get excited, right? Now we're getting going on coding here, okay? So in order to code this, the first thing we should do is, your first consideration when you're starting to code is what's your platform? And so are you using the in-browser IDE, are you using the desktop IDE, or are you using a local environment of some sort? I'm on a local environment here, and so that's what I'm going to use to build. So if you're using the IDE, it's not a whole lot different. Either way, we're going to need to create a new repository on GitHub and add the spec.md file to that repository and then get started. So I'm going to use, as I mentioned before, a gem called Corneal. And so if you want to look that up, if you just Google Corneal gem, the GitHub for it is under Brian Emery's GitHub, which is the Brian Emery /Corneal. And basically what this is a generator for Sinatra. Rails has generators where we can quickly and easily build files. So we now have that ability in Sinatra with Corneal. And the way it works, if you don't have it, we just run gem install Corneal. I already have it, but it's not going to hurt anything to run that command again. And then to quickly scaffold my project, once this runs, I'm going to say Corneal new, and I'm just going to say Sinatra journal app. And notice what this does. Is this, by the way, Please tell me if you can't see something or if it's too small. This is probably a little small for you. Is that better? Or maybe it was fine. Please let me know if any of the text is too small or you can't see something, because I do want it to look nice, or I want it to be readable. So now notice that I've got all these lines of code that say create. And if I now cd into this directory, which is created, and I open it, I'm going to see a structure that should look familiar, a file structure, that is. And notice that I've got an app folder, a config, db, library, public spec, config.ru, gemfile, rakefile, and a readme. Okay, so this should look familiar to everybody. I don't think I'm going to spend a ton of time going through the file structure, but does anybody have any outstanding questions about the file structure that you see here? Nope, everybody's comfortable with the Sinatra file structure? Notice that my app contains my MVC, my models, views, and controllers. I already have an application controller that's nicely scaffolded out. Corneal does a lot of this sort of beginning work for us. It's a really nice gem to use. I get my models here, my views, I get a layout folder and a welcome page. This is a Corneal custom welcome page. We'll see that in a moment. I get my config folder with my environment. It already has my database set up here. I get a database folder with an empty migrate folder. That's where my migrations will go. I'm not really probably going to use my library folder. I might use my public folder if I decide to bring in some images. I'll definitely add a little bit of styling, but we're not going to go crazy. I'm not sure yet whether we'll write tests. I have that as a stretch goal, but I'm not going to delete this file yet because I have it as a stretch goal. So I'm going to leave that alone though for now. Config.ru, this should look very familiar to all of you. This is the file that allows us to build this on top of rack. I require my environment and then I run application controller. This is also where I'm going to mount other controllers with use. I will also, does anyone know what other code will go here? In order to send patch and delete requests, I will need to add a line of code here. Does anyone know what that is?
Rack method override.
Okay, that's right. And the command, the method I'm going to use is use, and I'm going to pass rack method override. And that's going to allow us to send patch and delete requests when I use a particular hidden input, which we'll talk about for delete and patch requests. So I can submit forms that aren't just get and post. Okay, cool. So now I have the basic scaffolding of my application. And now what I want to do is go ahead and create my GitHub. So what I'm going to do is go to my GitHub page and go to my repositories and click on new. And I'm going to call this, let's see, Sinatra Journal app. Oops, that's good. It's going to be public. I'm not going to initialize with a README because Corneal already built one for me. I'm going to create this repository. And I have some options here. GitHub's really nice. I can do a quick setup, create a new repository from the command line, or push an existing repo from the command line. Aha, this is what I want to do. And so I actually haven't turned this folder into a repo yet. Does anyone know the command I'm going to use to do that? Anyone? It's a git command.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, what was the question?
What git command initializes an empty repository in the current working directory?
Is it git init?
It sure is. And notice I get a little response here, initialize an empty git repository here. And now I can go back and see push an existing repo from the command line. What steps do I need to take right now before I can push anything from the command line? Does anyone know?
Do you need to copy and paste the commands from GitHub?
I do need to do that, but right now, if I look at git status, it says on branch master, no commits yet, and I have a bunch of untracked files. Nothing added to commit, but untracked files are present. So I actually get nice feedback here. And what this is telling me is, hey, there's a bunch of stuff in this folder, but nothing's been committed. And so if I tried to copy and paste those commands, I would get some sort of a message saying, hey, there's nothing here. So even though I've initialized an empty repository, I haven't committed, I haven't staged anything for commit, and I haven't committed anything. Sherry, which window, I'm sorry, is hard to see? Can you, is it the terminal or all of them? Or
Yeah, the terminal a little bit.
does it still need to be a little bigger?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, awesome. Yep. So then somebody has git, I see git, Amit said git add dot. What does git add dot do? Anyone?
It adds anything that hasn't, or that's been saved in the git status.
Yes. And what we say is, and when we say add, what we're talking about is staging. And so with Git, we have in order to grab files and changes to files and then be able to submit them to our remote repository, or even just to add the commits to our local repo, we need to stage them and say, these files we do want to track and we want to add the changes that we've made. So when I say git add dot, what that means is all of these files and folders that aren't being tracked, I want to stage them. And now if I look at git status, they're all green. It says, look, now you have all these things ready to go, but you haven't committed them yet. And I'm going to now fire off a git commit with a message. And I'm just going to write initial commit scaffold project file structure with corneal. Okay. My commits should be very frequent. In fact, if I've coded for a few minutes and you haven't seen me commit, I encourage you to remind me to do so. Only a few lines of code, every few lines of code I should be committing. Anytime I've made a change that I want to keep, I should commit. So now I'm going to commit, and now I have, on my local machine, I've now made a commit, and the repository on my computer is now storing all the changes that I've made. If I look now at git status, I'm on branch master, nothing to commit, working tree clean. That means that I have committed every change that I've made right now within the file structure that's within this Git repository. Any questions about that? Now I can copy and paste from GitHub. So it says git remote add origin, git at github.com, Howard B. Dev, Sinatra Journal app. Git. Does anyone know what this first line of code does? It actually does almost exactly what it says. Right now, I have a local repository on my machine. I don't have a remote repo yet. So if I say, hey Git, what is my remote? Git remote -v. I get nothing returned. There are no remotes hooked up yet. Okay. So what this does is it adds a remote. It names the remote origin and tells Git where it lives. Okay, so I'm going to copy the first one. Even though I can copy both and run them at the same time, I'm going to do one at a time. So now if I paste this in, I hit enter, and I run that same line of code again, git remote -v, I'll now see that I have origin, that's the name, where it lives, and this is for fetching, in other words, for pulling down, and then also named origin, same location for pushing. So I have the same remote repository to pull from and to push to. For most of your projects, that's going to be the case. Okay. Finally, I'm going to run this line of code, git push -u origin master. Push is what pushes all my changes up to my remote repository. -u origin master is just really is what we have to include the very first time we do it. That's telling Git we want to push to remote repository named origin, and we want to push the master branch. For the future, once I've run this code, I could just do git push and it will fall to those defaults. Okay? And now if I go back to GitHub and I click on Sinatra Journal app, I should, instead of seeing all this stuff, I'll now see my file structure. I'm ready to go. Okay? Everybody okay with that? Any questions about that? All right, now it's time to get coding. This is exciting. Now we've sort of gotten to a really exciting place now. I have a file structure that's scaffolded out for me by Corneal, and I'm ready to rock. Where should we begin? And I could refer back to my guide here. Where should I go next? Build your models is what it says. Build my models, which means my migration model classes and associations, and test your models and associations in the console. So we haven't gotten to number 5 yet. We're still at number 4. So how do I build my models? Any thoughts? What do I need to do to build out a model? If I go back to my editor, where will my models live? Any thoughts? Not surprisingly, as Amit has pointed out, models will live in the models folder. But where else do I need to make sure to add instructions when I build a model, now that I have a database hooked up? So I not only need to build a Ruby model file, a class that's going to represent my model within my models folder. Where else do I need to include information now? If I want this application to save things and be tomorrow after I've shut down my computer, I open it back up, I want everything to still be there, what do I have to set up? Any thoughts? Migrations. And what will that's right, David, if I set up migrations, what will that create for me? What's the purpose of migrations? What does migration build?
So it's basically version control for your models. So it should create your models file as well. That's correct.
It's not going to create my models file. And I'm just being picky with your language. What will the migrations create though? Not the file, but the what? The tables.
Oh, right.
Right? The tables. So the migrations are what build the database and the structure of the database. So the migration files tells Active Record and SQLite, here are the tables to include, and here are the columns to put in those tables and the types. Okay, does that make sense? So the first I'm going to build a model by hand. I'm going to say new file, and I'm going to build my user model, user.rb. So class user, does anyone know what I need to inherit from? What gem am I using as an ORM or object relational mapper throughout this project?
Active Record.
Active Record. And what class within the Active Record gem, within the Active Record module, am I going to inherit from?
Base.
Base, that's exactly right. Yep. Okay, so now I have the basic structure of my user class. Do I have to build initialize, save, create, update? Do I have to build all those methods? Nope, says Amit, that's right. Why not? Where do they come from? They all come from Active Record, okay? So I can literally have the line of code you see here. In fact, if I wanted to do it on just one line of code, I could do that. And this might be all I need. Now, of course, it's not all I need because I do have some associations and some other things I want to include here. But now we can build a class When we inherit from active record, we get a tremendous amount of functionality out of the box. Okay? So now I have a Ruby class that represents my users. But now I need to add migrations in the database. Does anyone know what I can use, what tool I have besides Corneal? First, I'm going to use a different, sort of a more basic tool. What tool do I have here to build migrations very easily? Does anyone know? RakeDB create migrations. Amit, that's exactly right. So if I look at my rake file, what's a rake file, by the way? What's rake? Any idea?
Basically a way to automate certain repeated tasks.
That's exactly right. It's a way that we can use the command line to run commands and run a bunch of Ruby code without having to like write it out and run it from the, run it manually. And so it's a really nice thing. If you ever wonder what can I do with rake, I can say rake-t and I get a list of all the things, all the rake commands that are available to me. I think I need to bundle first. I never bundled, sorry about that. Now if I run rake-t, I should get my commands once that's all bundled up. And where do all these commands come from that we're about to see? They come from Sinatra Active Record Rake. So there are a whole bunch of commands, including rakedb create migration, and that's the one we're going to use. So first, I'm going to let this bundle. Then I'm going to see all my commands that came from Sinatra Active Record Rake. And there they are. And one of them is create migration. There it is. So let's see what happens. Rakedb create migration. What else do I need to do? Does anyone know the structure here that I need to pass in? I need to pass a parameter or an argument here. Name equals, that's exactly right. And I'm going to call it exactly what it is. Create users table. Okay. And let's see. Notice that I see, it shows me what was created. If I go back and I look inside of my migrate folder, there it is. I've got create users. Class create users table inherits from active record migration, and I get this method def change, and this is where I'm going to actually build my table. Does anyone know the name of the method to create a table? It is create table. Active record's really nice, and a lot of times the methods are intuitive. The first argument create table takes is the name of the table. In this case, it's users as a symbol. And then I open up a block. And I get a block argument here called t. And what this means is I now can call more methods available to me on this t object that are going to describe the columns I'm going to add to this table. And I know that we said t.name, oops, sorry, wait, oh man, what is the format here? Anybody know? T.string, okay, so T.string, I'm telling my database that I want to create a column that's of type string, and I want to call it name. I also want another string column that's for email. And finally, what else? What's this last one that I want to do here? What's the last? How do I build the password column is really what I'm trying to ask. Password digest. Why am I going to use password digest? Why don't I just say password? Anybody know? Anybody want to take a stab at it? In order to encrypt the password, that's right, Amit. So password digest, because I'm using bcrypt, if I look at my gem file, I get bcrypt given to me here already, which is nice. I'm going to call this column password digest. That's going to allow bcrypt to recognize this is going to be the password column where it's going to keep it's going to keep the encrypted passwords once it has encrypted them. As soon as I write this line of code, what should pop into my head? What do I need to do right away before I go any further? In my user model in particular, there's a macro I need to call. Does anybody know what it is?
has underscore secure underscore password.
That's exactly what it is. Has secure password. And has secure password is we have access to this through bcrypt. And what it does is it allows us to use an active record method called authenticate in order to, which authenticate takes a password as a plain string and checks it against bcrypt's hashing algorithm to make sure that it's the correct password. Okay. So now I have has secure password in my user model. I have t.string password underscore digest in my database. This is in my migration. I've definitely written enough that I need to commit this right now. So I'm going to look at my git status, and I've bundled, which is why you see gemfile.lock. I've added a user.rb file, and I've changed the contents of my database folder with that migration. So I definitely want to add all these. I'm going to use git add dot and git commit, and this is almost too big of a commit. Remember that commit messages should be concise, less than 50 characters, and very specific. So I should be able to in a very small manner describe everything that I've done. So this might even be too big. But with my commit messages, I use what's called the imperative tense. And basically what I want to do is I want to finish the sentence. I imagine that I'm talking to my project manager, right? And I say something like, if you accept this commit, it will, and then finish that sentence. So if my project manager accepts this commit, it will add user model file and migration to build user table. Okay. Again, that's probably a little too much for one commit, but that's okay. We're still practicing. I'm going to go ahead and push that. Notice I no longer need to say origin master. That's now the default. If I wanted to commit something other than origin as the destination and master as the branch, I would have to specify that. Okay. So that was cool. I used a rake task in order to build the structure of this migration file. And now I'm going to use a different tool. I'm going to go back and use corneal. And I want to say corneal model journal entry. Journal entry. And notice that this is going to automatically create the model file and the migration for me. Notice that we get that feedback that has happened. And first I'll check out the model file. There's journal entry. Class journal entry inherits from active record base. And if I look at the migration, create journal entries inherits from active record migration. That's exactly right. I get my change. And I also get, notice that I also got a little automatic structure for my create table. And I get this neat line of code, t.timestamps null false. Does anyone know what that will do for us? What that does is it automatically gives me timestamps anytime I create or update a model. And I really like that on all my models. So I'm actually going to copy that and paste it into my users table as well. Remember, I can make changes to migrations until I've migrated them. So I'm still allowed to make a change to this migration file because I have not run migrate. For the record, I could have on my corneal model journal entry, I could have added more parameters here to represent the attributes that I would include. I chose not to do that. I'm going to do that manually here. Okay. I chose not to do that, or I forgot. Either one, right? What we said, I know we said we wanted content, which is going to be a string. Okay. And then what was the other really important attribute that we need? I think Alwina's the one who pointed it out. A foreign key, yep. And what is that foreign key that I want? User, so just like that. User ID. And what data type is user ID going to be? Integer, that's exactly right. So t.integer user ID, okay? As I write this, I should be, what should pop into my mind? Similar to when I wrote password digest on the user model, it made me think of something. What should I be thinking of when I see t.integer user ID? What macros do I need to add now to both of my models? Any thoughts?
For the user model, you need has many journal, or I forget what we made. And then for the journal model, you need a belongs to user.
That's exactly right. Okay, so now this is great. So I now have my associations in my, these are active record macros, my associations into my users. And I think I finished up my migrations, at least the first round of them. I'm going to double check them. And as far as I can tell, everything looks pretty good. I'm also going to, one thing I like to do actually.
Howard, not to interrupt you, but maybe it's time to do a quick commit.
Yes, and that's exactly the type of interruption that I want, because you're exactly right. It is definitely time to commit. So what I'm going to do right before I commit, I'm going to double check these. And what I just did is I just split up my screen a little bit so I can see my journal entry class. And I've got these reversed, don't I? Let's see. Let's move these around a little bit. Oh, come on. Okay. Create journal entries. Wait, how did I do that? Oops. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. User, users table. That was harder than it should have been. Okay, so I've got my user model, my user migration to create the users table, my journal model, and my journal migration to create the table. And I like to put them like this and just look at them before I run the migrations. Has secure password. Does that tell me I need anything specific? Yes, I need a string of password digest. Got it. Has many journal entries. Do I need anything in the database for that? No, I don't. Okay, not on the has many side. I've got my name, email, and password digest as strings, and I have added timestamps. This all looks good. My journal entry belongs to user. Does that mean that I need anything in particular in the database? Yes, I need the foreign key of user ID. There it is. I also have content and timestamps. This is all looking great. I feel pretty confident now about migration, but I love the interruption a moment ago, which is that I need to commit. And in fact, if I look at this, I'm going to run git status. And there's way too much stuff here. Okay, I've modified too many files. So what I'm going to do, what I can do, which is really nice, is I can git add, let's do app models user.rb, and I'm going to commit that. What did I do here? Does anybody remember? I added an association. Add has many journals entries association. I'll just say add has many association. Okay. Okay, and now I can, let's pick off what did I change for the users table? What I can do is I can run git diff if I'm not sure, and I actually get a little list of stuff that has changed. And notice it's talking about the modified file here. It looks like I added timestamps. So if I forget, I can just run that. So git add db migrate 2018 blah 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 4 looks like 039 create users table, there it is, and git commit this one. I add timestamps to user migration, users table migration. Is that okay? Then I've also added the model and migration for journal entries. So I'm going to include those in one commit, even though it's a little bit big. So now I should only have, if I run git status, I should have 2 untracked files left: my model, my journal model, journal entry model file, and migration file. So I'm just going to add that all together, especially since I use Corneal to run this. Git add dot git commit. Yeah. Add journal entry model and migration using Corneal. I also added the associations and associations. So this is definitely a little bit long for one commit, but that's okay. And now I'm going to push all those commits up to the remote. And notice now I get a much more granular commit history now than if I just grab them all together. So if you do go too far and you've written way too many changes to too many files, you can pick and choose and break them into multiple commits, which is what I just did. Okay. And notice that 2 minutes, 1 minute, and a few seconds ago. So those commits are now broken into 3, which is really nice. Okay. All right, but the best way, of course, is not to do it that way, but to just keep up with your commits as you go. But we all forget. We're all human. Okay, so now this is exciting because I get to take the first step in actually making these changes live, taking these changes and building something that I can play with. And that what am I talking about? What can I now do? What command am I going to run from the terminal right now that I'm really excited about? Anyone? It's a rake command. It's a database command. Rake db. Okay, I love that you said that. I meant you said rake db seed. Before I can seed the database, I need to actually have, do I actually have a database yet? Yes, it's migrate. Notice that inside my database folder, all I have is a migration. If I don't have a schema and a database file, then there's no database yet. So I need to migrate first. That's why I just checked out those migrations a minute ago. And when I run migrate, I should get some feedback in the terminal window here. And besides that warning. And I create users table and create journal entries. Awesome. And now if I look, I've got a database file, which we're never really going to look at, and a schema file. This is what we'll look at to see the snapshot of the current structure of the database. Okay, this is great. So now what Amit said was, how about seed? And I think seeding the database is a really good idea. Okay, so what file do I need to create in order to seed the database? It's called seeds. I just put it in the top level of the database folder. And basically in here, okay, here's where I'm just going to create some seed data. So basically what I can do is create some users and some journal entries. Okay, so I'm going to create 2 users. And what I'm going to say is user dot create name Howard. I always start with myself. Email Howard at Howard. Oops. And password. When I type in create now, do I use password or password digest here? Does anybody know? Let's try password and see what happens. I have a very secure password there of password. Yeah, I'm just going to create this, mimic this again. Let's see, Sherry, I think you were the first one here, so this is in your honor here. Your password's just going to be password though, sorry. That way I can remember everyone's password. So I've got 2 users here, and create some journal entries. Okay, and so let's do journal entry dot create, and let's see, content today is Tuesday and it's great. And what else do I need for a journal entry? A foreign key, yeah. And so what I'm going to do is actually create some variables in here. So I'll say Howard is this first user, just to make life easier, and Sherry is this second user. Okay. So how can I add my foreign key? There are several ways I can do it. An active record is versatile, and that means, what I mean by that is I could just pass in the ID itself. So I could say user ID is howard.id. I could also say something like user is Howard and pass the entire object. I could also do something like, well, actually, what I'll do is I'll do it both ways. User ID, howard.id. And the next way I'm going to use, actually, I'm going to use active record to, I'll use a ridiculous term, pre-associate data. Oh my gosh, associate data. Does anyone know what I mean by that? What are the methods I can use to create data that's already associated with a particular user or a particular other object? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? There are methods I can call on active record collections that will come associated already. What I can do is do something like howard.journal entries dot create. So I can call create, update, and another one I can call is build. And now this is already going to be associated, or it should already be associated with me, with Howard in the database. Content, we are building a Sinatra app. Yay. Okay. And that should be all I need there. We can do the same thing with Sherry. I'll demonstrate build. Sherry, I'll say Sherry's entry equals Sherry.journal entries, journal entries dot build. Sherry, do you have anything you want to say today?
It's super cold in Virginia.
It's super cold in Virginia. Okay. It's pretty chilly here as well. I'm in upstate New York. Great. Does anyone know what build does? Build instantiates an object that is already associated, that already has that comes populated with a foreign key. So in this case, suppose that Sherry ends up with a user ID of 2, then this new journal entry will instantiate a new journal entry with a user ID of 2. However, build is similar to new in that it doesn't commit to the database. So if I want to save this, I do have to call save. Okay. So now I have, let's see, let's add another journal entry. I'll just add another one. Oh no, I already have 2. That's enough. Okay, cool. So I'm going to save that, and now let's go ahead and run our seed file, which is rake.db seed, and I should actually get no feedback from a successful seeding, and I get no feedback other than the warning. I'm not counting the warning as feedback. So now how can I now check and see if that worked? What tool do I have, or tools do I have to look at my database from the console and see if everything worked the way I want it to? I haven't built any views yet, or any controllers even for that matter, so there's no way I can see this in the browser. Does anyone know what gem I'm using that's going to allow me to look at my database? It's tux. It's exactly right, Elvina. When I run tux, I might get an error, and that's not a big deal. What I'm going to do is run bundle exec tux, and that should work, hopefully. I'm going to still get some warnings, no big deal. As long as I end up with this command prompt, I'm happy. And now if I type capital U user, active record says, yeah, I know what that is. Okay. If I say journal entry, it's recognized. If I say hot dog, doesn't know what that is. Great. Okay, so this feels right. So what I can do is I can say user.count. I should see 2. User.all to see all my users. My first one is Howard, second one's Sherry. This is great. I can do the same thing with journal entry. .all, .count. And what I'm doing is just verifying that everything worked the way I want it to. I believe that's right. I made 2 journal entries for myself and 1 for Sherry. So if I say Howard equals user.first, Howard.journal entries, dot count. I have 2. And Sherry equals user dot second. Sherry dot journal. Journal entries. And there they are. I see one right there. It's Holden, Virginia. Okay, and that's all she's got, which is good. So this seems to be working. Anybody have questions about anything we've done so far? What should I be thinking it's time to do? Yes, it's definitely time for a commit. Thank you very much. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is run git status. It feels like we made a lot of changes, but we really didn't do a lot. We just migrated and built a seeds file, and I think that's okay. So git add dot git commit. Oh my gosh. There. Oh my goodness. No capital M's. Okay. No. What's going on here? Howard can't type today. There we go. If you accept this commit, it will migrate DB and seed, migrate DB, build seed file, and seed DB. I'll just say migrate and seed database. Wow, that's a lot easier. Okay. And there we go. So today what we got done, we wireframed, we thought about our minimum viable product, what it's going to look like. We chose our models, we added our associations, we built out the basics of our database, we added some seed data, we built our models. I'm feeling really good about what we got done today. Does anyone have any questions about anything we did today whatsoever? There are no silly questions. You can even ask me a private question in the Zoom chat. There's a way to choose the little blue box or the little blue thing down there. If you just want to send it to me privately, I won't say who asked it. But I encourage you to ask out loud. Any questions? Anything we've done? Anything? Any questions?
When's the next series?
Same time next week, Tuesday. I was thinking about adding some more, more frequently, but I haven't decided on that yet. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. If I figure out how to do that, there it is.